And in three, two, one. Hello and welcome to the first ever episode 2 of Lapsed Graps, a podcast where I, Sam, a person who watches pro wrestling, sit down with my friend
Jam, who doesn't?
and we discuss the wacky week that was in professional wrestling. We had a big week this week, starting off with SmackDown on Friday, all the way through the weekend with All Out, AEW's penultimate show. So we're going to get right into it. On SmackDown, Sasha and Bailey, the longest reigning at this point SmackDown or just WWE Women's Tag Team Champions, split. Bailey just beat the ever loving crap out of Sasha. It looks like Bailey's going full heel turn and Sasha's going to turn babyface, which is an interesting development for that character because I think a lot of people actively watching the shows agree that Bailey is doing much more interesting stuff as a heel than she was as like Bailey, who's just so happy to be here. So that is really, really cool. And I mean, when I say she beat her down, she beat her down, man. It was crazy.
What triggered the split finally?
So at SummerSlam, they both faced Asuka for their individual championships because Bailey was the SmackDown Women's Champion and Sasha was the Raw Women's Champion. So Asuka faced them both for their titles on bookend ends of the night. Sasha lost her title. Bailey did not lose hers. So that was kind of that first little glimpse of like things were starting to go awry. And then 1 week later at Payback, they were challenged for the tag titles by Shayna Baszler, who recently got called up from NXT, and Nia Jax. And the Nia and Shayna just beat them easily within like 10 minutes. It was very clear from that match that they just weren't on the same page. They weren't gelling the way they usually do. And you've kind of seen these cracks start to form over the last like 2-3 months with Bailey starting to get more confident in the fact that she is a legitimate champion. She's been defending her belt forever. And without that weird like 3 week stint from Charlotte to be a 14-time women's champion, she would have held that one belt for over a year now because she lost it to Charlotte and then almost immediately got it right back so that Charlotte could have the title reign and it would break hers up. But that was kind of where that split goes, and it's interesting. A lot of wrestling fans prefer Sasha and Bailey when they're feuding against each other. You know, they've had the greatest women's match of all time, at least in WWE, while they were feuding. They're so talented in the ring, and that charisma really comes out and shines when they're facing off against each other more so than when they're teaming up, at least in my opinion.
I always like their chemistry, just in general, because like they're those type of opponents that really click no matter what they're doing. If they're next to each other on the same side of the ring, they're hilarious together. That friendship from real life really bleeds into on screen. If they're on opposing sides, they produce really amazing classic matches like Takeover. And from what I have seen in the feud before I got out of wrestling, and even just from stuff that I've heard, their storyline's been really well done in a way that it's kind of reminded me of like how the two-man power trip would have gone with Stone Cold Triple H if Triple H didn't get injured, with them
Mm-hmm.
winning all the belts and them like having the slow dissension. So you see like little tiny cracks here and there, but nothing like full on yet. Well, now we've got the full on split apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said that Bailey beat the crap out of Sasha. Like, was it bad enough that you can expect her to be out till, say, Royal Rumble or like?
I don't know about Royal Rumble, but she at one point took Sasha's wrist and put it in the steel steps and
Mm,
slammed the steel steps into the ring. And Sasha sold like she shattered her entire arm. So I think the idea is to get her off TV for a while and let Bailey's confidence as like this ultra mega heel kind of build and then have Sasha make that valiant return.
mm.
If not at Royal Rumble, then at least to be the person who challenges her at Clash of Champions here in a couple of weeks, which I think would be too quick of a
Hmm.
burn on this one just to have them clash. Sasha wins or loses, and then it kind of folds apart. I hope they keep her off TV a little bit longer. God knows if anyone deserves a break, it's Sasha. She's been going, 52 weeks a year for probably the last 2 or 3 years at this point. It seems like everywhere you turn, she was, back before the COVID times. She was doing a fan meeting or a like special signing or working house shows or anything like that. Like she is very much happy to be there and happy to give all of her energy to that company. So if this is just like a little 2-month rest for her, I'm good with that.
Assuming that Clash of Champions is in September, right? It's usually always in September, I think.
Yeah, I think it's in 2 weeks. I think it's the last Sunday of September. I
Wasn't
think.
wasn't Payback just last week and SummerSlam was the week before that?
Yes.
I'd be exhausted if I was a wrestling fan
They're
right now.
starting to get back into their early 2010 ways, man, and it's rough. And then it gets even more rough when you realize that New Japan's Dominion show was like 2 weeks before that, and All Elite's been doing pay-per-views, and Impact's been doing pay-per-views through this whole thing. So for a while there in August, there was a pay-per-view every night to every like 2 nights on the weekends.
Jeez, that's a lot. But
Yep.
yeah, like if Clash of Champions is coming up, is literally the next pay-per-view, then that might be too soon. I think would be best fit for WrestleMania stage
Mm.
since fans have been waiting for them to clash again for so long. I think they haven't done a one-on-one since maybe Takeover, maybe some Raws after that, but like everybody remembers their Takeover matches from 2015, 2014. There's a whole lot of hype and build up for this. And I feel like if you pull a trigger on that too soon, then you really waste something special. Even if WrestleMania is a long way away, I still think they could stretch this out, have Bailey go on her reign of terror for a few more months, then like I said, ideally, if I was doing it, I would say have her come back at the Royal Rumble, have her be like a surprise entrant, win it, then take the next January to February, or sorry, January to April to just build on that storyline and just have the feud flesh out until you get that crescendo at WrestleMania. Do
Yeah.
it too soon, you just waste something special. But if you stretch it out, it makes people want it more.
Absolutely. The ideal situation here would be that, Sasha is just off TV up until Royal Rumble, which is still a few months out. And then, we haven't seen her. And then we get that John Cena moment of like her, appearing at 28, 29, hasn't been seen for 6 months, and the world goes crazy. Hopefully by then, certain people in power will have gotten their heads out of their collective asses and will have put this COVID thing to bed, so there'll be fans in the arena, because I think that is a return, much like the Drew McIntyre win at WrestleMania, that deserves a crowd, that deserves that like roar of appreciation.
One more thing, because you mentioned that Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler beat them. When and why did they become a tag team?
They became a tag team because SmackDown needed another women's tag team to challenge for the titles, because uh what is it? Um Alexa and, oh goodness, I'm the worst. What is her name?
Nikki Cross?
Yeah, Alexa and Nikki Cross broke up recently because Alexa got attacked by the Fiend, but might be in love with the Fiend. There's not really been a payoff to that. Like, she got
Okay.
attacked and she was terrified, and then the next time the Fiend showed up in the ring with her, and went to like do the Iron Claw choke with her, where he shoves the glove in your mouth,
Mhm.
she grabbed the heel glove instead of the hurt glove and like put his hand in her mouth. And there hasn't, yeah, it's weird, there hasn't been a payoff on that, but she hasn't been teaming with Nikki since that happened.
It seems like a lot of breakups are happening, or at least looking at those two. And I think I saw something
In the
about the
women's tag
Iconics.
division, absolutely. Yeah, and the
Okay.
Iconics, they lost a match on Raw last week and were forced to split. And they actually had their first singles matches on the main roster this week against each other. And Billy Kay pinned Peyton. Billy Kay pinned
Also, they had the
Peyton.
one-on-one match already.
Yeah, so they've already done the one-on-one match. They lost a match to the returning and re-debuting Riot Squad, and the loser of that
Ooh,
match had to break up their team. So Liv and Ruby Riot are
okay.
back together on Raw, and the Iconics broke up, and then I believe it was, yeah, it's the Raw that we'll be discussing here in just about 20 minutes or so, where they had their first one-on-one match in the company at all, because they've always been a tag team, and they had it versus each other, and Billy Kay ended up coming away with that pin.
Okay, so it seems like in a matter of like 2-3 weeks, the women's division has seen 3 breakups, and the towels are now on 2 single stars.
Yes,
That's
a very hot-shotted team that is basically rehashing Team Hell No, because
mm,
their championship celebration was Shayna being very serious and saying, we won because I put the team on my back. I beat the
mhm.
crap out of both these ladies and I killed it, which is true. She did. And then you have Nia Jax, whose character work has never been my favorite, kind of coming in, bouncing in the ring, being really happy and jovial and being like, no, we did it because I won and I beat them and it was all on me and it was amazing. And it's really, it just shows how little WWE as a whole cares about tag team wrestling, especially when we start talking about some of the other promotions where it's just like, oh no, these tag teams are taken seriously and they're considered teams, and people who like would jump in front of someone else for them and like take a hit because they don't want their teammate to get hurt, like they care. And then you have a bunch of hot-shotted singles wrestlers that never work together pitting your longest reigning champions to take the belt off them because you're too lazy, I guess, to bring up one of the established teams in NXT and do that, or you just don't want to have your main roster girls lose to NXT stars. I don't really understand it, but it's frustrating.
Yeah, they're for whatever reason they've got like a big problem with tag teams, especially in the women's division. Like I remember when the Iconics were together, they had the tag team tower. I feel like they were champions for like 6 months, but we only saw them like a month out of those 6 months. They would
Hmm.
disappear for several months at a time. So like for every reason, it's either they don't know how to book tag teams or they just hate tag teams. I feel like an actual tag team could benefit from this because I'm not 100% sure how long Sasha and Bailey had those titles, but they were super over as a team. So like
Hmm.
anybody who beats them, super over. But Nia, and you know what? For all I know, Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler could be super over. I
They're
haven't
not.
seen much react. They're not.
They're
Okay.
not. They're not.
Okay. That's not surprising, especially since they're two. Are they still heels?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, two heels are not gonna get over being two heels. I feel like that could have gotten a big babyface reaction if some baby faces beat them, or like you said,
Exactly.
someone from NXT beats them already immediately over being
Hmm.
called up to the main roster. Again, wasted opportunities for whatever reason.
Especially since the women's titles are meant to be defended across all three brands, but you've had two defenses on NXT. So in the last year that they've been claiming that NXT is on the same level as the other two brands, their top women's tag team titles have only been defended on that brand twice, never
Hmm.
been held by an NXT tag team. And NXT has by far the largest stable of women's tag teams in the company. So really, how seriously are they taking that division at all? And that's definitely one of the main reasons that FTR ended up quoting as they left WWE is that tag WWE is the place where serious tag teams go to die,
They're not
because
wrong.
you couldn't have been more over in the independent realm as a tag team than FTR or even Redragon, Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby
Bobby
Fish when
Fish.
they came in. Like, you couldn't have been more over, and now Bobby Fish is a bumbling like yes man in the undisputed era. They seem like they're maybe setting up Kyle O'Reilly to have a singles reign, which is going to be interesting. But I mean, it's just every really talented independent tag team that comes in and tries to make a name for themselves gets immediately broken up and disbanded, and then the teams that are formed in house aren't any safer. They get disbanded as well.
Specifically on the main roster, because like we've seen a lot of success stories with tag teams in NXT, like again Revival, American Alpha, and I don't know if it's just a smaller audience that makes it easier to get over, but those two teams were super over. Then as soon as they get to the main roster, Revival's doing a bunch of comedy skits, they're losing all the time. Then American Alpha, I feel like they were only together on the main roster for like half a year before they split. Like you can't really say
Yeah.
much about them.
Yeah, and then even going further back, you have teams like the Vaudevillains who, with a ridiculous gimmick, it was
Yeah.
absolutely a comedy gimmick, but they
Hmm.
got over in NXT, and then they they were broken up and sent their separate ways within a couple of months of debuting on Raw. It's just, for whatever reason, there's more room, at least there used to be more room for NXT to kind of try and test and fail and then allow gimmicks to kind of grow on people than they're giving them in the Raw and SmackDown era. And that could entirely be because it was on the WWE network and they just accepted that they were going to have a lower viewer base. But now that you have them on USA directly competing with All Elite, who is kind of allowing people to go out there and try and, see what gimmicks work and what don't and make those changes week to week, there's a real difference in their viewer base and the fans that are willing to give them the time of day. But just real quick, swinging back to SmackDown, because I do want to bring you up to date with this one, because I think you're really going to like this. You had Jey Uso defeat King Corbin, Sheamus, and Matt Riddle in a fatal four-way, similar to the ones we talked about last week on Raw to determine who was going to challenge for the WWE Championship at Clash of Champions. This is for the Universal title. So Jey Uso has earned the right to challenge his cousin Roman Reigns at Clash of Champions. And this will be the first time that I've been able to find that those two will face off in the ring at all, let alone in singles competition. From everything I was able to kind of track down, it doesn't look like the Usos and the Shield ever really faced off. So this will be the first time, kind of a meeting of the families. And it'll be very, very good, I think.
I really like that. That's the type of trial and error I'm talking about, where you're just trying different things. Like thematically, it makes perfect sense. Like the bloodline thing, the family connection, that could tell for great stories. But because Jey Uso has been in a tag team his whole life, and because he's a twin, people just thought he was just a tag team guy for life. But last I checked, Jimmy Uso was injured. So might as well just give him some singles time. And I might be getting him mixed up with Jimmy, but one of them, there was like a year where they had like the second or third most wrestled matches of the year because one of them was injured and they were just having a bunch of nonstop matches on live events.
I
And
think
like,
that was Jay that did that, but I don't think it was because
okay.
Jimmy was injured. I think that was when Jimmy had the DUI and was kind of
Oh,
shelved for like 6 months.
okay, you might be right there. But yeah, in any case, Jey Uso really, it seemed like Jey Uso really blossomed at that time. They're both really great wrestlers, but when you take one away, they've proven that they can prove their worth, like prove themselves as single stars, but because they're twin brothers, exact same character, exact same look, WWE has always been hesitant on just pulling the trigger on doing something like singles worthy for them. And after like 10 years them being in the company, they're finally just doing something different. And I think that's super cool and super good for Jay.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it leads to a lot of really interesting matchup possibilities because you have uh Big E, who is doing his own singles thing right now. You've got Jey Uso doing his own singles thing right now, and then you also have Roman Reigns continuing his singles thing right now. So you have three guys from the three biggest tag teams of the last 15 years that kind of made their names in tag team wrestling, all getting that opportunity to show that they are just really, really skilled and talented singles guys. Obviously, Roman has had chance after chance after chance at showing this off, but it's a really good thing that they're letting the other two kind of get this down. And it's not something that I would have thought 6 months to a year ago that we ever would have seen in WWE.
It seems like SmackDown is really shaping up to just blow up to its nickname of Land of Opportunity. Roman Reigns has had a lot of opportunities, but this is his first opportunity to be a bad guy. Then you got Big E getting a singles opportunity, Jey Uso doing his thing. Like they're actually trying new things, and I actually like that from the sounds of it.
Yeah, definitely. And then moving over to AEW, we had All Out this weekend, which is their kind of penultimate WrestleMania style show, if you will. A lot of stuff went down on this show. There was the Big Swole versus Britt Baker match, which we talked about last week after quite a bit of online outrage and just general, like, what the fuckiness of it all. It got moved to being the opening match on All Out. Was not a great match, in my opinion. It felt way too kid gloves to me, where, Britt is obviously their biggest women's star right now. She's just coming off an injury. She's got the, dad Cody Rhodes like plastic face mask on right now to protect her nose that got busted a couple of weeks back. So it didn't quite get as physical and as hellacious that as we know that Big Swole can go, because it seemed like she was really trying to protect her, which is great and fine. It felt a little clunky to me.
Was it actually like a cinematic match like they were hyping up, or was it like
Cinematic is such a weird term with wrestling, because if it's done right, every match is cinematic. This is more, it was not filmed in the arena. It was filmed offsite at a place that they claimed was Brit's actual dentist office that she like still owns and operates out in Florida. Uh, that's where they claimed this match was going on. So you had like at one point there was a spot where Big Swole stabbed her in the leg with a Novocaine drip, and she couldn't use that leg to kick her anymore. And she, Britt Baker hit Big Swole over the head with her DDS degree, and it was just it seemed,
wait,
and
like
that's
the actual like frame degree?
yes, like her actual frame degree from university. She took it off the wall and smashed the frame over Big Swole's head. And it seemed like I love the fact that they are actually committing to a character with Britt Baker. AEW has always been very good at that, of being like, this is your character, this is what we're doing, and we're following through, even at times when they probably really shouldn't, like with the librarians. But it felt way too gimmicky and like wink wink nudge nudge, I'm a dentist IRL, guys, lol. I didn't dig it. I know a lot of people did, but it just, in my mind, it was a waste of 20 minutes. It would have been a waste on the pre-show, and it was a waste on the main card.
It was 20 minutes long.
uh I think with everything all in told, it ended up running about 20 minutes. Yeah.
Did they have like actual like cinematic clips like they did with the Funhouse stuff with the Stampede, or was it just all in that office?
It was it was Rebel, who is called Reba on AEW, sitting behind the reception desk. Big Swole comes in. Reba isn't paying attention, hands her the clipboard to sign in, and she'll be seen by a dentist shortly. Big Swole breaks that clipboard over her head while she's screaming that she's here to Brit, and then the match gets going. There was no real like Big Swole driving to the dentist office, or like, any kind of like security precaution. It seemed like she rolled up on a Wednesday afternoon on a slow day in that dental office and just started beating the hell out of her.
That sounds like, see
Bad.
with like the doc, yeah. Like I'm trying to I'm trying not to hate everything I hear about wrestling, so I'm trying to give it the benefit of the doubt, but
Yeah.
it does sound like it had like amusing moments. But if it's just 20 minutes in the dentist office, I can imagine how that could get tiring after a while.
Yeah. The Novocaine spot was hilarious, and it was
Mhm.
great because I don't know, I might be the only one, but I've always wondered, like, well, what happens if I put that in my arm, or if I put that in my leg? Is the whole thing gonna go numb? And supposedly, yes, it will. But I don't know. I feel like that match would have been so much better served if it hadn't been a gimmick match, if it had just been a lumberjacks grudge match, or a no DQ, or a weapons match, or something actually in the arena, especially since there were fans at All Out. Like, I feel like it could have done so much better being in front of people than being played on that video screen for the arena to kind of react to.
Even if it wasn't in the arena, like I feel like they could. I feel like from the sounds of it, it was just kind of a missed opportunity. Just because like it just sounds like a backstage brawl to me from the sounds of it. If they're just wrestling all over the dentist office, and if you're doing like a pre-tape cinematic match, like you got a lot of free range to just try different stuff, like try a bunch of weird stuff. And from the amusing parts, it sounds like they did. But outside of those amusing parts, just punching and kicking each other all over a dentist office, then that sounds really boring and really fast, really fast.
Yeah, if it did anything for the company, it served to show why WWE is still kind of in a league of their own, because they took the cinematic match idea and they capitalized on it, and they did it really well. And with AEW, it really just felt like, Britt wasn't quite back up to 100%, but they needed a match. So they said, oh, we'll make it cinematic and we'll cut around the spots that are a little rough. But, when most of the match is a little rough, there's only so much you can cut. And then we go into the Casino Battle Royale, which happened also on the main card, and we have Matt Sydal debuting in that final spot on the Battle Royal. You may know him as a former WWE Tag Champion as a member of Air Boom with Kofi Kingston back when he debuted on ECW TV.
I forgot about that.
That's kind of his last real big thing that I'm aware of. I know he worked with Impact for a while and
Hmm.
has been doing his indie stuff for a good bit of time, but where I've seen most people know him from is as a member of Air Boom. But yeah, he debuted in that battle royal that was gone on to be won by Lance Archer. So he now owns the poker chip, which gives him a world title shot of his choosing, at the time of his choosing, rather. So
Okay.
he'll be able to challenge the current champion pretty much whenever he wants, which I'm assuming is going to be at the next pay-per-view.
Okay. With the Seidel debut, it seemed I feel like he's got an opportunity to really, I guess, rechristen himself, reshape his career. Because like you say that he's only been really known for the tag team, but every time I think about him, I only think about that the shooting star press spot he did with Randy Orton when he gets RKO. That's the main thing I think
No,
about when I think.
definitely. I mean, he is
Hmm.
he is very talented, and
Hmm.
it's my own ignorance of that time period of WWE that leads me to be like, oh yeah, he was a member of Air Boom with Kofi before we knew that Kofi was actually talented.
I don't feel
And
bad. I'm ignorant to it too. It's just that they always re-show that clip of the shooting star
yeah,
press RKO.
yeah, no, definitely, because it was just an incredible way to like show off both of those guys' agility and ability to just sell like crazy.
Hmm.
Yeah, hopefully he'll, be able to make a name for himself. He did not appear on last night's episode of Dynamite, so I don't know what's going on with that. But then also, neither did Matt Cardona, so it might just be that they're kind of spacing out their contracted talent for right now. Because I know last I heard, Cardona had only signed like a 5 appearance contract and was still kind of renegotiating some other aspects. So he might actually be done, if they weren't able to come to an agreement. But knowing his and Cody's relationship, they're absolutely going to come to an agreement, and he'll be on AEW for quite a while to come. Although it would be very cool to see him rock up on Impact one day with Brian Myers.
That would be cool. Just having them, giving them time to be like a legit tag team rather than a comedy tag team.
Yeah, definitely go back to their FCW days where they were facing
Hmm.
off with the likes of Brock Lesnar and things like that in the ring, and actually
Yeah.
holding their own before
From
Brock
their
was given that rocket strap.
yeah, what they used to call themselves, the Major Brothers.
Yeah, they're the Major Brothers tag team, and then they were the Edgeheads when they
Yeah.
actually made their debut in WWE. So they
Yeah.
were they were the Edgeheads all the way through their first title run, and then their most recent title run with WWE, I think, was as the Major Brothers again.
Yeah, like I remember just watching them as a kid growing up. That was when I was like super into wrestling. And then like watching that like evolution from Major Brothers to Edgeheads, I always thought was super cool. The when he turned into like the take care, spike your hair, it took a while for me to get used to it because I was like,
Hmm.
what is this? It just kind of came out of nowhere. But like the way he owned that character, it's hard not to latch onto it. So like actually on that point. Like, is he still doing like his catchphrase stuff in AEW?
So he's not doing the boom 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 stuff. What he is doing is always ready. So his gear still has a Z and an R on it, but
Hmm.
the way it is it's always with a Z and then ready directly below it with the big capital R. So you have the capital Z, capital R, kind of like a gimmick there. And then his merch usually says "not there, still here," kind of stuff like that.
Mm, okay.
So he's still kind of workshopping what he's doing. It's working so far though.
Okay. As long as it's working, and if it ever stops working, hopefully he can workshop and to just evolve himself into something different for the AEW audience.
Yeah, no, and that definitely seems like something again that AEW is comfortable letting their talent kind of work through, even if it is only on Dark, which I don't watch currently, just
Hmm.
kind of letting them, play around and figure some stuff out. But continuing on with All Out we had a Matt Hardy and Sammy Guevara, uh, like no, well, it's not no DQ. It was more of a like falls count anywhere match where Matt and Sammy got up on a scissor lift and went what ended up being, I think, like a story and a half in the air, so like 35 feet, and they were
Hmm.
supposed. Matt was supposed to spear Sammy onto some tables down below that were like merch tables set up. They missed, and Matt ended up landing on his head on the concrete, like outside in like the inner concourse area of the Daly's place. Uh, Looked clearly concussed. They had the doc come out. The doc spoke with him for a minute, and then the match was continued, which is a major like sticking point with the internet wrestling community right now. Is like,
Hmm.
why was that match continued when he was so clearly concussed? And Matt's wife Rebby went off on Twitter for a good couple hours and just was calling out everyone in the AEW office, was calling out Matt himself, and was just really, really pissed. And I've seen a lot of discourse lately, especially from like Booker T on his Hall of Fame podcast, kind of bringing into question on whether or not it was a work or not, and if he actually landed wrong and he actually got concussed. But I mean, you can hear it just on the raw audio. You can hear the slap of his head hitting that concrete. There's no way that that was a work. I 100% believe in my mind and in my heart that he lost consciousness there for a minute, had no idea what was going on, and just woke up and was told to finish the match.
Okay, so I haven't seen the footage, so I can't comment on like if he looked like he had a concussion or not. So the only thing I really want to ask is he okay now?
Yeah, yeah, he appeared on this last week of AEW television to kind of address everything that was going on in the internet reaction. He apologized to the fans and to his family for scaring us, and said that he was completely fine, still making a full recovery, which how can you be completely fine if you're still recovering, and hoped to return to the ring soon. So there's a lot of kind of double speak going on because you had Rebby online on Twitter saying that, he is not fine. He was in the hospital all night. He's been having brain scans. She's terrified. No one from AEW ever reached out, and da 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 da. And then you have people like Brian Alvarez and Dave Meltzer tweeting out that they've spoken with people who have intimate knowledge of the situation, and Matt is fine, with Rebby again coming onto their Twitter page and be like, well, you haven't spoken to me and you haven't spoken to Matt, and we're the only ones with intimate knowledge. And so who's your source? What are they telling you and why are they lying? Kind of stuff like that. But then again, she shows up on AEW to be there with her husband and their new baby boy to kind of show that support. So it's a bit of, is it a work, is it not? And if it is a work, this is one of those situations where you just need to come right out and say, like, it was a work, I'm fine. Camera angles and trickery, and no one's hurt. It's just, it was a thing we thought would entice the match, and it backfired, and we apologize, and then you get to move on. But doing this whole he's fine when he clearly was not is a bit backhanded and gross, at least in my opinion.
It seems like there's a whole lot of convoluted, unnecessary drama involved in this whole situation.
Mm.
Where at the bottom line, people should just be asking, is he okay? And then just support him however you can. Like them being people in AEW, whoever's close to the situation, just give us a clear answer if he's okay. Reminds me of a more elongated version of what happened with Cody Rhodes like a year or two ago at the first, I want to say Firefest or Fight for the Fallen when
Where he got hit over the head with the steel chair by Sean.
yeah, and he was like
Yeah.
really busted open really bad,
Hmm.
just blood just gushing out. And then like everybody involved, Young Bucks, Brandy, Tony Khan, everybody just came out immediately saying, okay, we did this spot's gone wrong, Cody's recovering, we're never going to do chair shots to the head again. Very simple, cleared it within like 24 hours. That's how I think this situation shouldn't be. There shouldn't be like a big hoopla over certain circumstances. It's just, is he okay or not? Just, is there ways to get around the situation? What went wrong? Just that should be. These are like simple questions with simple answers, and it seems like people are like stretching out. People being, I guess, everyone involved in the situation just stretching out further than it really needs to be. I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. Continuing on with All Elite, we had Hikaru Shida, the current AEW Women's Champion, defeating Thunder Rosa in easily her hardest fought match with the strap so far, which was my hope for her that she was going to be able to do that. Her record in 2020 now moves to 17-4. So she is rolling through 2020 right now. She looks crazy. And then on Wednesday night, so last night we actually saw it announced that Thunder Rosa is expected to defend her NWA Women's Championship on next week's show. So that's going to be really cool, and that answers the question we had last week of are the NWA titles going to be defendable on Dynamite when NWA talent roll up there? And it looks like, at least in the eyes of Thunder Rosa, they will be.
All right, that's really cool. I'm really glad they're really expanding that partnership. I feel like that could be a really great partnership with time and development on screen and off screen. And I'm really glad they're giving time to Thunder Rosa and Hikaru Shida. Let me not assume, like, are they doing stuff with Hikaru Shida, or is this like an iconic situation where she's got the towel, she's getting wins here and there, but she's disappearing at long periods of time? Are they actually
Uh,
investing in real time?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of that, which could come down to COVID because she was much more active on the show before COVID and all of that. But yeah, it's definitely been a couple of weeks before she started her open challenge, and since she started the open challenge, she has shown up just about every week. She wasn't on this Wednesday's episode, but that could just be because they were building towards the Thunder Rosa match with let me double check who that is with actually. I think it's with who she fought last week,
Okay,
but let
while
me
you
double
look that
check.
up, has she been doing open challenges like challenging someone else every week, or was it like the Thunder Rosa thing where she challenges someone and Thunder Rosa just shows up, I'll face you at the next pay per view, or is it like a weekly thing, like the John Cena thing from a few years ago?
It was definitely a weekly thing until Thunder Rosa showed up, and then Thunder Rosa said, I'm going to challenge you at the pay-per-view. So she was facing off with people for about 3 or 4 weeks before Thunder Rosa kind of came through. It really ran kind of in concert with Cody doing his TNT Championship defenses. Okay, and then while I am pulling up who she's going to be facing next week on AEW, we're going to get your opinions on John Moxley defending the AEW World title against MJF. Wardlow made himself available in the match by distracting the ref and trying to toss Moxley, or not Moxley, MJF, that dynamite diamond ring he's been having on his pinky that he kind of uses to punch people in the face and knock them out. Uh, Wardlow kind of underhands it really wide, and MJF bobbles the toss, which leaves him open to fall victim to the paradigm shift, which was the move that was banned during that match. Knocks him out, and Moxley is able to pin him for the 3 count and retain his title.
Mm, I'm kind of 50-50 on that here and that. So like on one hand, I like the execution of that because it also just gives way to like teasing a split between MJF and Wardlow. But I'm
Hmm.
also worried that split may be too soon because I don't even know if they've been together for like a year. So like splitting them maybe too early. If they split and then MJF gets a better bodyguard with star potential, like say, I don't know, Lance Archer, for example, then it could work. Maybe turn Borlo into a baby face. But I don't know. Do you think it would be too soon to just break them up?
I definitely think it'll be too soon because AEW as a whole, as a program, hasn't even been on the air for a year yet. Their anniversary show is actually coming up near the end of October, and I think Wardlow's really only been active for the last 6 months or so. So I definitely think it's too early to split them up. My only worry is that Wardlow is too dominant to leave him subservient to MJF for too much longer without
Mhm.
him kind of losing any of his credibility. Because Wardlow really hasn't been doing much in the ring. I think he's had a match against Jake Hager and maybe faced off with Dustin Rhodes, but that's 2 matches in 6 months. So I think if you don't let him kind of make himself present in the ring and give him that kind of dominant run, you're going to start messing with his credibility, and it's going to be really hard to get him off the ground when you're finally ready to pull the trigger on it.
That's a great point, and especially like I feel like in the whole time they've been together, Warlow hasn't been like a huge factor. I can't think of a time when Warlow helped MJF win a big match because usually MJF would win again with the diamond ring or a low blow using dirty tactics of his own. Like he never really needed his bodyguard's help. And since his bodyguard hasn't even helped him win a championship yet, it's kind of like, why are you here? Like he's
Yeah.
already losing credibility. So like if you split them, it might be too early, and Warlow might just be just left in the dust, and maybe MJF could lose some luster without that bodyguard presence. But at the same time, if you keep them together, then they're kind of just hurting each other's credibility the more they stay together. So it's like a lose-lose situation, it seems like at this point.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely one where you're damned if you do and damned if you don't with this split, because it's being teased pretty heavy right now. It's just a matter of, are they gonna be able to pull the trigger on this fast enough that fans don't lose interest? But jumping back over to WWE real fast, we're going to talk about Monday Night Raw from September 7th. And actually, before we get into that, I did find the information on that NWA title defense, and that is going to be Thunder Rosa defending her title against Ivelisse, a fellow uh, alumni of the promotion known as Lucha Underground, and that'll be on this Wednesday's show. Thunder Rosa and Ivelisse are both really, really talented luchadors, and it'll be really, really interesting to see them kind of face off against one another and see if they have chemistry in the ring. And then back over to Monday Night Raw on September the 7th. Something we talked about earlier. Peyton Royce, actually, not Billy Kay. Peyton Royce pinned Billy Kay just 1 week after their forced splits. So they were forced to split up. There was a lot of tears. Peyton Royce and Billy Kay had a decent match. It really only ran for, I think, about 5 or 6 minutes. Peyton got the pin, and then they tearfully hugged and like embraced in the middle of the ring before, separating and going their own separate ways. So it looks like this split and singles run for Peyton is going to be something that is kind of carried on, at least for the long term right now. They could rejoin in together, but right now it looks like they're sticking with the fact that Peyton is going to be a single star.
Okay, I like the fact that as they're splitting, there isn't like an actual really split technically. Like they're not a tag team anymore, but it's not like a breakup. They're not feuding. It's simply we got go our separate ways. You go this way, I go this way, but we've always got love for each other. Basically, I think that's compared to what WWE usually does with breakups and tag team splits. That's a really nuanced way to go about it, and I kind of like that.
So speaking of the way that WWE usually does tag team splits, Cedric Alexander turns heel and breaks up his tag team with Ricochet to join MVP's The Hurt Business. So the Hurt Business has been kind of trying to run roughshod. They've had a bit of a start and stop kind of run of things lately, where they're trying to rule the men's divisions with the tag and singles divisions. There, they've got some gold under their belt with the United States title, but that was really it. And Cedric Alexander, really for no apparent reason, decided that the Hurt Business is where he wanted to be. So he turned on Ricochet backstage and beat him down, and is now a member of the Hurt Business. What do you think about that?
I actually don't hate that. Well, I hate the fact that they keep breaking up these tag teams. I feel like this is like the fifth tag team breakup you mentioned in like the last week. So it's weird what they're doing with tag teams now. But as far as
Mm-hmm.
like this one, I don't mind. Maybe I'm like creating context in my head. But the last time I saw them, Cedric and Ricochet weren't really getting much TV time, and when they were always losing. So like I can understand character wise the the idea of why Cedric would want to try something new. And I also really like the idea of Cedric being a heel because he was a heel in Ring of Honor. He was doing great stuff, but they just didn't really do stuff with him.
Yeah.
And he was doing like good heel stuff on the indies as well. And I feel like if he could bring that type of character out, especially around a bunch of great heel characters like MVP, Shelton Benjamin, and Bobby Lashley, he could flesh out himself and just really come into his own. I feel like I'm not sure how other people think about the idea of a heel Cedric, those who haven't seen his Indian Ring of Honor work. But I feel like those who doubt the idea of him being heel could be really surprised. And if they play their cards right, if he continues to progress and improve, he could really shine as a standout in that group.
No, definitely. He definitely has the most to gain from joining the Hurt Business. I'm not a huge fan of the way they went about, putting him with them. I would think there was a way to do this that also kind of brought Ricochet up with him and didn't make Ricochet look like this kind of ridiculous, like candy cutter jobber that just didn't know what was happening until it was too late. I hate that they're doing my boy like that, and I feel like there were better ways to handle this than what they went about doing it. But all in all, the result is not the end of the world.
But I feel like they could also like play their cards right with Ricochet there. Like him just getting beat up could look like make him look like a jobber basically. But if they play him up as more of a sympathetic babyface, I just lost this tag team. I don't know what I'm going to do. I lost my best friend. I'm losing guidance. If they actually put character stock in what they've got on paper, it could set up for like a really good character arc. I don't know where that character arc could go, but I feel like there was a few places it could go where if they want to, they could make Ricochet and the storyline something worth watching, something people get invested in.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And then the final thing from Monday Night Raw, we had Keith Lee facing off with Randy Orton again, except that this match was interrupted by current champion Drew McIntyre, who ran in, delivered a Claymore kick to Randy Orton's face. The match was called a disqualification, and Randy took that victory, which kind of rolled right into Raw Talk, where Keith was a guest and delivered a promo directly to Drew, saying the following: "I'm asking you to give me a chance. If I'm making waves, just let me surf. Don't insert yourself into any more of my matches. Let me sink or swim on my own merit." They're friends, they're buddies, but he's getting a little fed up with him using, you know, his matches as an opportunity to exact his own revenge. I think this will lead to what could be a really, really interesting heel turn for Keith Lee, or just kind of another expected heel turn with Drew.
I feel like just a feud, or maybe not a feud, but just a match between him and Keith Lee would be really fun on paper. So like there's definitely an allure there, I think, of just having these two guys face off. And I don't even think you really need to turn either of them. I feel like just even as baby faces, you get these two behemoths, these two really huge heavyweights, just give them a stare down, create some buzz over that. Then you actually have a match and they're just clobbering each other. I think people will love that. So if that's where they're going, and it seems like it might be going for Clash of Champions, just because it seems like they might be treating it as like a filler pay per view, and with filler pay per views you could just have free range to just do random matchups like that. I think that
Yeah.
could be really fun.
Yeah, definitely. So moving over to Impact Wrestling from Tuesday night, we had a main event with Eric Young in a kind of demonstration match with Tommy Dreamer, the Innovator of Violence. It wasn't for the Impact World title. It was just a match to put Tommy in his place. So the match ends. Eric pins Tommy, and he starts kind of targeting his leg in the way that he has been doing with his recent challengers, trying to injure anyone who has like the balls to step up to him, so that eventually there will be no more challengers. That attack is broken up by the returning Rich Swann, who I think 3 weeks ago now had a full in-ring retirement ceremony on Impact Television because, as far as story goes, he was beat down too bad by Eric Young and was told he was never going to wrestle again. And a lot of people took that bait, myself included, saying that, Rich was actually done. But he shows up, storms the ring, still on crutches, and swings wildly, kind of backing Eric out of that ring and having them just standing on opposite sides of the arena screaming at each other. So the belief now is that Rich is a lot further along in his recovery than we thought, and he'll be making a return at Bound for Glory.
Is that the next pay-per-view?
Yeah, that's at the end of October. Bound for Glory is. I think it's the 26th.
Okay, and Eric Young is the world champion now.
Yes, Eric Young is the current Impact World Champion.
Okay, that's
He
really
pinned
fast then.
he pinned Eddie Edwards last
Mhm.
week on Impact.
Oh, so this is like a really new reign then.
Yeah, he's only held the title for 1 week at this point.
Okay, so
And he re-debuted at Slammiversary about a month and a half ago.
yeah, I remember hearing about his debut. That's what really surprised me about it so fast. Because Anniversary was like a month ago, like you said, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they just give him Timber. Well, it makes sense because he's got that veteran experience. He was in TNA forever many years. He's kind of just, my understanding, he's just picking up where he left off before he left WWE. So it works. But with which one, I did see that retirement angle on my timeline, and I too thought it was a real retirement because like the
Mm.
way he was like selling it in the ring was really well done, and
And
like
the
I didn't
moment at
know.
the end with Rich and Willie Mack, where they like are both crying and they
Mhm.
hug in the ring before Willie like helps him out, it broke me, man. It was rough.
I feel you. And Swan's a really good actor in that regard. He's really good in the ring in general. Like one of my favorite matches from last year was this like, was it? No, it was a gauntlet match, and he was basically the Iron Man of that gauntlet
Hmm.
match. Like he was playing the underdog role, just barely winning by just the scrap of his teeth for like everybody back to back to back for like an hour. Then he finally gets pinned by I think Brian Cage, maybe. It's been so long
I
since
think
I've
it
seen it.
was Cage that ended up winning that Iron Man or that gauntlet and going
No, it was
on to challenge for the title at that point. I believe that was correct.
it
Yes.
was actually Tessa Blanchard who won it, but it was like Cage was like the
Oh yeah,
second
yeah,
to
yeah.
last
You're right. You're right.
person.
You're right. You're right. Yes. My
But
bad.
yeah, no, you're good. It's but yeah, Rich Swan. What I'm trying to get at is that Swan is just incredibly talented, and if the goal here is for him to win that title at their basically their WrestleMania pay per view, then I hope they pull the trigger on that. Like it's the fact that Eric Young has won the title so fast. I mean, already, it kind of it's giving me second thoughts if it's even the I wouldn't say the right idea to have him lose the title so soon, but more so like will they have him lose the title so soon? And if the match at Bound for Glory is him versus Swan, I think they should because Swan has shown in the last few years with his X Division title reign, his Iron Man performances, he's talented enough to lead that company. And I think him with the world title would be a really great decision.
Absolutely. I think he will definitely end up being the Impact World Title holder. I don't know if it's going to be Bound for Glory, just because he was still on crutches and he was still in the walking boot, and that could just be a work that he's fine, he's healed, he's good to go, he's 100%. But they need that for storyline, and if that's the case, then full speed ahead. God be with you. Go for it. I worry that they're gonna pull that trigger too fast, and he's gonna end up re-injuring himself for real this time, and we're gonna lose out on a really talented guy.
Is this the same injury he had like last year from the I forget what the pay per view is called, but like he injured his
The
leg or
injured, yeah. So the week before Slammiversary last year, he was at Bash in the Brewery down in San
that's it.
Antonio, which was an Impact Plus exclusive, and he, I think, tore his meniscus in his knee. And so, yeah, he fought his way back from that injury, re-debuted at Slammiversary to be part of the four-man match that ended up being a five-man match with him for the world title. Was injured by the current champion, and then this is kind of him coming back from that. So it's very cyclical with the injury before Slammiversary, the injury at Slammiversary, and then now him coming back to challenge for the world title.
Okay, I'm hoping he's not like having any like strenuous stuff with that same injury, and it's just a work, which I think might be like for whatever reason in wrestling, whenever someone injures their knee, they always go back to that knee as
Hmm.
like a storyline angle. Did with Tegan Knox, Daniel Bryan's, always a knee for some reason. But if he is healthy enough to win this title, then I think that'd be a great decision.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's past time for him to kind of have that trigger pulled. He was a really, really good X Division champion, and he was a really, really good tag team partner with Willie Mack. So if they're not going to at least pull the trigger and make him a world title holder, put him back with Willie Mack and let them, take the tag team straps off of the Motor City Machine Guns and kind of run with it that way. All right, moving into NXT from Wednesday, we had the continuation of the four-man Iron Man match that we talked about last week, where they were in sudden death, not right after the match, but now this next week, and we had Finn Balor beating Adam Cole to become the NXT champion for his second reign. Adam Cole, after the match, cut a interesting promo that sees him kind of maybe prepping for a face turn where he compliments Finn on his ability and the grit to fight it out for an hour last week and then the 20-minute match they had this week and how he was just the better man that night. But if he's given the opportunity to challenge for it again, he knows that he will win and he will destroy. So it was interesting. It was interesting.
Okay, with Cole, I think turning him babyface or even just Undisputed in general babyface might be a good thing. Again, the whole trial and error thing, just trying new things, and Undisputed Era has been like the top heel group for like feels like 3, 4 years now already.
Yeah, since they debuted, they've been running heel. They've never had a lasting babyface run.
Yeah, so if they try to be babyface now, then it'd be a nice way to switch things up finally. And with Finn Balor, I think that he definitely deserves this title. The way he came back to NXT and just basically remodeled his whole character back into something similar to when he was Prince Devitt in New Japan. He really came into his own and worked really hard to regain the credibility he hasn't really had since he first won the Universal Championship. So like a second NXT Championship reign is very well deserved for him. Very happy for him there.
I was not a huge fan of this match. I wasn't a huge fan of NXT as a whole this week. It didn't grab me nearly as much as other shows I watched this week. It
Mhm.
was okay. Like, it was a match. It was two guys that are really good and know what they're doing, going together and fighting it out, which, should get me a lot more hype than it did. But I think it was a lot of exhaustion from the hour-long main event last week to just being like, oh, okay, we're doing this again.
How did the cage match we talked about last week hold up?
Yes. Rhea Ripley ended up pinning Mercedes Martinez inside of that steel cage. Following the match, Martinez is removed from the Robert Stone brand. So there is speculation that she is one of the people that's associated with Retribution because you have Dominic Dijakovic, who has been off of NXT for several weeks. He went off of NXT around the time that Retribution started popping up on the other main roster shows. So there's speculation that he is a member of that faction. There's speculation that Mercedes is also a member of that faction, and just all of that. So it was a really good match. It was a much more intense match than I thought they were going to allow them to have. Mercedes came down to the ring first and immediately started throwing steel chairs and tables into the ring, none of which became super used through the course of the match. Like there were spots, but it wasn't as much of a like, I have a chair in one hand, you have a chair in the other, and let's just beat the crap out of each other. There definitely wasn't any of that, but it was still a really, really good match. Okay. So moving from NXT over to last night's Dynamite, as we discussed at the top of the show, Miro, formerly Rusev in WWE, debuted and cut an intense promo on WWE as a whole, mentioning that he lived for 10 years in the same house with that same glass ceiling, scraping his skull every time he walked around, reaching and scrabbling and climbing for an imaginary brass ring to haul himself up into fresh air, and telling everyone behind the camera to take that brass ring and shove it up your ass. So there's a lot of hurt feelings, it seems like, coming from Miro's end, which is completely justified. You had his promo interrupted by several chants of Miro Day, and, welcome home and things like that. So the crowd that was in attendance seemed very excited to see him and very immediately receptive. And I feel like this is going to be the start of a really, really interesting chapter in Miro's history.
So we talked a little bit about this before the show, and like I said, of all things I was able to miss in wrestling, this promo was the one thing that was brought to my attention. And watching the promo and hearing everything Rusev had to say, or Miro, I should be calling him now, I kind of hate it, to be honest.
You hate it.
I hate
Okay,
it.
let's hear why.
So like you said, like if there's hurt feelings and he's perfectly inclined to have those hurt feelings, I don't have any problem with him having those feelings. I have a problem with the fact that it's kind of becoming a trope between everybody who's left WWE, which I guess I get because it's the type of thing that gets people talking to for your first promo as soon as you leave WWE to be like, oh, they held me down, they kept me from getting the brass ring, such and such. But like it becomes such a trope that I'm just tired of hearing it. And like even you said earlier with Zack Ryder, he's got T-shirts that says "Still here, not there." I think you said.
Hmm.
And like if everybody's gonna do that, it just gets really dry. Like first off, why should I really care? Like, if hearing it from one person every now and again, it's kind of like, okay, you might have legitimate reasons, especially if we really know the story behind all those reasons. Like, if CM Punk came back and he said, oh, they held me down, we know his story, so we kind of get where he's coming from. If everybody who gets fired says, basically has sour grapes about it, it just comes off like that, sour grapes. It doesn't really sit right with me, the fact that it sounds plain.
See, I disagree with you, and for one reason specifically is
Mm.
there is that demonstrative effort on both Zack Ryder and Miro, now formerly Rusev's side, of being like, no, they were legitimately screwed with and legitimately held down.
Mhm.
Like, Zack was so over that he was in the ring with John Cena at one point and people were cheering for him during the height of the Cena era. Like, Zack got himself over, went out of his way with the Z True Long Island story, the internet champion, made himself a household name, and sat in catering for an entire year from 2018 to 2019. He went almost an entire year without having a televised match on Raw, been sitting at catering for 52 weeks, except that they brought him in for a multi-man tag match on the last episode of the year. So those two both have that demonstrable like point of like, hey, we were screwed with. We got over on our own and management didn't like that. So they put us back in our place. But you know what? Management's not here right now. We're going to do our thing. If someone like Sean Spears was coming out and saying, oh, I've been held down, I've been like put back and all this kind of stuff, then yeah, you've got an issue because it's everyone doing it. But I think with these two guys in particular being the ones that are kind of carrying that torch of saying, like, I got screwed with and I'm here to show that I am better than the person that you've seen on your television for the last 10 years in the case of Miro and almost 15 with Zack Ryder. I think that that's a valid way for them to kind of establish themselves to the audience in AEW.
I'll give you that with Zack Ryder at least. Rusev, I'm not 100%. Maybe he's telling his story more on Twitch and I'm just not aware of it. But like, even if he is, it's kind of, well, with staying on Rusev specifically for a second, I kind of feel like why? I feel like that's a good babyface promo to have, basically. Like, people wanted to see you succeed in WWE. You didn't because you were held down, forces outside of your control. We get that. you go somewhere else to make a name for yourself, and immediately we want to see you succeed. So we're gonna. You saw the part that Rusev had. He got the huge pop. He got cheered by the fans, like legit actual fans, and he immediately cuts this babyface promo, I guess, just to say he's been held down, only to descend into his heel promo. And we already know he's going to be a heel coming out because he's Kip Sabian's best man, which I don't have enough context to know what that even means, but he's the
Kip
best man now.
Sabian and Penelope Ford, they're engaged, and their engagement is part of storyline. So he's the best man at their wedding, and is saying like, "I am the best man at this wedding, but I am also the best man in AEW." It's a bad gimmick
Mm.
to start with. It is
I was
absolutely
gonna
a bad
say,
gimmick.
now
But
that
I
I
think if
actually,
anyone can get over a bad gimmick like that, it's gonna be Miro. It's gonna be Rusev.
yeah, he's got a long way to go because like knowing the context now, I really hate the promo, but like oh man, I but outside the whole best man thing, like he's this heel character now. I want you to say things that's going to make me want to hate you. I you already came in with me wanting to cheer you, but you're not really making an effort to make me want to see you as a bad guy. And even outside of that, I feel like promos like these just break the immersion basically. Like it kind of I feel like we were talking about immersion like a week ago, or and like with another friend, I was talking about how like something like Raw Underground breaks that immersion, basically saying, "Oh, these matches are fake, but what you're watching now, these are shoot fights, these are real." These
Hmm.
promos are kind of like saying that everything else you're seeing in the ring is fake, but I was really held down. That was real life. I'm talking about real life now. So like the way a promo like this just breaks immersion, it's just I just hate stuff like that, and to see him even just barely try to put on his heel face and poke out his chest as a heel tough guy now, as this new heel character he's trying to get. It's like saying, okay, like everything else is fake, but this is real. Now I'm going to be fake again. It's just I just hate it so much.
And that's fair. You're wrong, but that's fair. Uh, so
That's also fair.
continuing with the AEW, we had one appearance from the Young Bucks last night, and that was when Alex Marvez went to their locker room, dressing room, to interview them about them throwing uh, Hangman Page out of the Elite last week. The Young Bucks answered the door and immediately dropped the double super kick on Alex Marvez, knocking him out cold and leaving him laying on the floor before slamming the door. So it looks like they're being turned heel, and they're going to be the ones that go full heel on the company out of the Elite. Which is interesting. I've always liked the Young Bucks a lot more as the kind of smarmy, I'm better than you, and I'm better than you, and if you don't like me, it's because you don't understand real wrestling. Kind of like those holier than thou hipster douchebags that they were doing on the indies before the AEW kind of became a thing and before the Elite became as popular as they were. That's kind of my favorite era of PWG, is them just sort of running over the PWG tag division and being like, well, what do you expect? We're us and you're you. We're obviously going to win. I definitely prefer them in that role than their kind of, eat your vitamins and say your prayers kind of baby faces they've been for the last couple of years.
I agree with that. I feel like that really defines that type of heel idea, really defines who the Young Bucks were, at least how they were introduced to me, like as these guys who did a lot of super kicks and then people complain, oh, they do too much super kicks, like, oh, you don't like real wrestling, we're gonna do nothing but super kicks now. So like
Hmm.
that really defined who Young Bucks were to me. And in that character, I really like that type of character, really smarmy hipster heels that just do what they want to spite you basically. And if they're bleeding back into that character, I think that could be really entertaining. It's surprising to me that not only they're the ones that's turning heel, but they're turning heel on Adam Page, which they always tease Hangman being the heel guy. But if they're self-aware enough to recognize that Hangman Page has gotten this alcoholic cowboy character over and people aren't going to boo Hangman, it's smart to get the people around him to turn heel instead.
No, absolutely. And speaking of Adam Page, we also had JR sitting down for an interview with Kenny Omega, where Kenny announced that Hangman Page and his partnership is officially over. They lost their titles to FTR at All Out. I don't know if I brought that up during the All Out section of the show, but they lost their titles at that show, and it has been kind of wondered about and disputed on whether or not they were going to continue as a tag team or if Kenny was going to be maneuvering back into singles wrestling. And it looks like he is going to be going back to singles wrestling with his name on the website for All Elite Wrestling being updated to the cleaner Kenny Omega, and for him and Adam both being moved from the tag teams section of the roster to singles talent.
Why are all these promotions just breaking up tag teams now?
Well, I think Adam and Kenny breaking up is definitely for the best. Like, they were very dominant champions. They held the title for nearly 4 months, but they weren't. I mean, with a tag division that stacked, like, the last thing you need is two hot-shotted singles guys kind of running over the entire division and making the entire division with like 50, 60 years all combined of tag team wrestling looking weak the way they did. I think the only way we'll see Kenny come back to tag team wrestling and all elite wrestling and it making sense is if Coda ends up coming across and going with them and they kind of reunite the Golden Lovers in that way. But I think having Kenny and Hangman both as maybe even baby faces, even in only in just their own minds, and kind of having that will they won't they face off kind of mentality, I think is going to do a lot more for the company than those two as a tag team did.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. Like I feel like for as long as they were tag teams, they got a lot done. They maybe even exceeded expectations as far as like people just viewing them as a tag team destined to break up and feud, but they not only lasted longer than people expected, they had a lot of great matches. So if you got all you could out of that partnership, then it's best to just have them go their separate ways. I'm fine with them splitting though, like the timing of like all these tag teams splitting up everywhere
Yeah.
in the last 2 weeks is just a little weird to me.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the time where everyone's getting kind of split up and sent on their own way, which feels a little odd, but hopefully it'll work out for the better going forward.
Which is funny because fall is always viewed as like quote unquote cuffing season. You want to get partnered up with somebody, but now
Yeah.
all the partners are breaking up.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. But that does it for the weekend wrestling. So we're gonna move into my indie watch list, which for this week is the GCW Tournament of Survival 5, which can be found on Independent Wrestling TV. This is just it's 3 hours of the best deathmatch guys and girls in the country, just beating the holy hell out of each other. This is a match that we talked. This has a match that we talked about when I appeared on your mental health check-in pod with Alley Cat going through a flaming table at one point. Alley Cat, one of my favorite independent women's wrestlers at this point. And it's a really fun watch. It's 3 hours. It doesn't get too intense. It's a really cool setting because it's on the Jersey Shore, so you're like looking out on the beach and at a pier, like they're in an abandoned like parking lot. It's a really interesting setting, and it's just a fun way to watch.
Okay, that sounds really fun, and I'm glad you actually mentioned the mental health check-in too, because I was gonna say that this time next week is when your episode is gonna drop.
Well, all right then. We've got something to look forward to.
hmm And speaking of looking forward to, I guess I can bleed into my own segment, unless you were still going with your segment.
No, man, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, my segment is just like analyzing everything you told me this week and me deciding or telling listeners it's now a good time to get back into wrestling or watch wrestling. I say if you like tag team wrestling, don't. If you
Just don't. Just don't. Just leave it at that. End of the podcast. Cut it. Hit the music. Just don't.
exactly because I'm a huge fan of tag team wrestling. It just kind of breaks my heart to hear like 10 tag teams broke up in like a week, but
Yeah,
like
yeah. It was a rough week for Jam and his tag team over there.
exactly. But yeah, if, it seems like some stories are going in interesting directions, others not. There are a couple things we talked about today that I head, namely the Rusev thing. But again, there were things like the Cedric Alexander thing that's like, oh, that could be interesting. So it seems like a lot of wrestling is going in interesting directions, but to say it's actually 100% interesting now, I can't really say that. Maybe that's my tag team bias, but you know, hopefully it gets better.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it will. I think it will. It's just this was a weird long week where, just so much wrestling this week, man. It was crazy. I'm really looking forward to next week where everything is kind of back to its normal schedule and we have a couple of weeks before the next WWE pay-per-view that'll take over the world.
Okay. Well, hopefully you got something good for me next week, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So thank you all so much for tuning in. You can follow me on Twitter at Gladen, Sam, and you spell out comma COMMA, and you can read my coverage of all things pro wrestling at dailyddt.com.
And you can, well, hypothetically, you can follow me everywhere that's at Wham Bam It's Jam, but I'd say don't. You'll be disappointed. Instead, just follow, just check out the Mental Health Check-In podcast. We're doing good stuff over there. That's worth following. That's Check-In Podcast on Twitter, Check-In Pod on Instagram. It's very good stuff over there, is what I'm saying.
Plug your Patreon, man.
Oh yeah, I started a Patreon last week. So if you type in patreon.com/, wham bam it's jam, you from my Patreon, I'm making some cool investments into the future and some extra income would be cool. So if you want to donate, that'd be super cool and I'd appreciate it.
So that's patreon.com// wham bam it's jam.
Yes. Or now actually I have to plug my Twitter now. If you go to my Twitter at wham bam it's jam, it's linked in the bio.
Alrighty. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on YouTube, and that's Lapsed Graps on YouTube. And wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a rating and review. It really helps the show out. You can follow the show itself on Twitter at Lapsed Graps. That's LAPSEDGRAPS. And until next time, we
We
out.
out.